Imagine having one extra day every week, more time to cook healthy meals, work on that novel, or just binge some good reality TV. Now it's all possible with ClickUp, the productivity platform that'll save you one day a week on work guaranteed. It's packed with features and customization options that no other productivity tool has, so you can work the way you work best. Use code BizTech to get 15% off ClickUp's massive unlimited plan for a year, meaning you can start reclaiming your time for under $5 a month. Sign up today at clickup.com and use code BizTech. Hurry, this offer ends soon.
Hey coconuts, recently inflation numbers have been on the rise. I'm sure you know, you don't need me to tell you, and all these economists, when they tell you, all these are delayed information. You and I, we feel it on the ground, right? Everything is becoming more expensive. Petrol prices are going up, food prices are going up, everything is going up. I was traveling to Turkey previously, and when I came back, I really felt it. But now the numbers are coming in, and it looks scarier and scarier. And I'm very happy that our darling Hsien Loong has finally taken a different position to say that we need to clamp down on this inflation situation. Because for the longest time in the mainstream media, we always hear this word called we are price takers. Which made me wonder, then everyone else don't need to take the price. Only we take the price? The reality is everyone takes the price. Some people just have more abilities to negotiate the price that they want. Okay, so that is the discussion that we need to have, and I'm very happy we are finally thinking about that. But on our personal level, what can we do to then play in this high inflation environment? Welcome back to the show. Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to another day with the Financial Coconut. In our podcast, we're debunking financial myths, discovering best financial practices, and discussing financial strategies that fits our unique life. You get it. Ultimately, empowering us to create a life we love while managing our finances well. My name is Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and today we're going to spend some time to talk about the big topic of the time: high inflation. How do we play in this space? But before I begin, I want to establish a few points. The first thing is inflation in itself is a delayed data set, right? It means by the time all your mainstream media or your economists or whichever bank guy come out and say, oh yeah, inflation numbers, blah, 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 blah. So you'll be like, bro, I already know. My wanton mee is like now what, $4? My kai fan is like what, $4 now? And maybe you go to CBD is 5, 6, 7, right? And then my petrol prices are, it's like, hey guys, I already know what you tell me now. So it's not very helpful in trying to plan for the longer term. And it's also an interesting situation where these delayed data sets, they are very hard to predict the future, but they can inform you what is happening. So what is an ongoing situation? All right, so don't need to mesmerize over these numbers, but recognize that, as the numbers come in, they're just telling you what is the reality today. The other big point is that different countries measure inflation differently. And in Singapore, the CPI index, which is a core inflation index that we use to measure, actually does not factor in property prices, right? We use rental price as the core inflation, which is why recently when you see CPI went up to 4-point-something%, 3-point-something%, historical high, blah, 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 and you see a lot of renters are complaining, right? You see all this coverage by mainstream media say, rent is getting very high, we have to downsize, blah, blah, blah. So that is the reality of the situation. So be aware of this and do not overly get riled up by some of the other inflation numbers by other countries, right? But in Singapore, we do not measure property prices, right? So you can see it from different ways, and I've established this in an earlier episode, trying to understand inflation in Singapore. If you are a homeowner, then be like, my property prices are moving, and okay, but if you're not a homeowner, then you'll be like, but the inflation number is so low, why property prices keep moving? What is happening? Because like it or not, a lot of us do see owning a property as a part and parcel of life, and if property prices keep moving up, inflation numbers look low, is it really helping you to achieve what you want to achieve? Well, that's a question mark. And the last little thing is that inflation and interest rates are two different things. You'll be like, duh, one is interest rate, one is inflation. Of course, they are different things. The reality is a lot of times when you hear in mainstream media or when you look at papers or you listen to experts, they always talk about these two things very closely, right? So it's like when you hear inflation, you will hear interest rates. Because to put it simply, it's like when you're sick. Okay, if you're sick with a particular thing, you need to take medication, right? So So in the realm of the economy, interest rates is then that medication to try to dampen inflation, right? Because there's a belief that if you increase the interest rates, it becomes more expensive for people to participate, and then, inflation numbers will come down, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to believe in this. You don't even have to agree, okay? Some of you may be very sophisticated. You read a lot. You want to see a different perspective, and you think that, okay, maybe this kind of monetary policies don't work, whatever, right? So that's a different discussion altogether. But the very fact is high inflation numbers will definitely affect our quality of life. We don't need the economists to tell us, right? Like, if our wages stay stagnant and then everything else becomes more expensive, it directly impacts our quality of life. And to make it a little bit worse for our fellow Singaporeans, we have all these other countries that are also experiencing high inflation, importing all this high inflation, and it's affecting their local supply chain. You start to see them needing to ban exports, right? So India, I think, banned sugar and flour. Of course, the famous ayam ban, right? So Malaysia has stopped exporting, or at least stopped exporting a big amount of chicken to Singapore. And of course, fun fact, right? For all of you that don't know, Indonesia has banned, palm oil exports. And when they announced the ban, I was like, okay, I don't really eat palm oil. Turns out that a lot of FMCG products, all your chocolates, cookies, and a lot of those things, there's actually a lot of palm oil inside. But all that aside, if you go to the supermarket today and you see cooking oil, that means whatever it's called cooking oil, they don't specify to tell you what kind of vegetable is this oil from. Not olive, not peanut, not whatever, like soybean, not sunflower. All the oils that never say what kind of vegetable is this coming from actually are all palm oil, right? So there are a lot of fried chicken, a lot of all these things that all use palm oil. So very, very interesting fact. Of course, not the best situation. I'm sure going forward, the next few months going to be very, very hard. Whether will this situation prolong, will inflation numbers stay high, will all these food shortages continue to exist and blah, 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 this one's a little bit hard to tell. At least for me, I don't have deep experts in this kind of supply chain. I don't know enough. But I am very happy to hear that our leaders of the day have moved away from this idea of price takers. We are price takers, we have no choice, blah, blah, blah. Rubbish! Okay, that's so laissez-faire. And for all of you that don't understand, laissez-faire essentially is free market, letting the market do its thing. It's a French word. But the reality is there are many things that we can do. We can subsidize fuel prices. We can make Malaysia sign some sort of trade pact that forces them to give us a constant supply of chicken. At the same time, maybe we can input capital to build their trade network. So there are many things that we can do that why aren't we doing those things, right? And just peddle this idea of we are a small country, we have no choice, we can only take the price, it's rubbish. So this is an idea of the past, and I'm very happy we have moved on. I hope that in the shortest period of time, we as a nation and our leaders can faster do something, take out whatever that they need to take out from their war chest to manage this situation, because it's gonna impact the people massively, and I'm sure many people are concerned. But beyond the little bit of bread and butter situation that I think many people will face, a lot of us will have some money sitting around, and we will then ask ourselves, how do we then thrive? How do we play in this high inflation environment? Because truth be told, in any environment, some people will do better, some people will do a little bit worse. And it's variable, depending on what resources we have, which stage of life we are at, what are we concerned about, what are our natural strengths and disadvantages. All these things will affect how we perform in different environments. So in the high inflation environment, I think there are a few things that we can do to try to survive better, or maybe even thrive in this kind of high inflation environment. And I'm going to start with the first point. The first point of how do you thrive in a high inflation environment is to buy more, buy now, and store. And I just want to say, coconuts, if this is the last episode that you're going to hear from me, then you know already I got some ISD. Someone ring me up, okay? Because the government narrative today with NTUC coming up and say all these things is to say that, relax, don't panic, we have all these supplies and blah, 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 which I think we do, okay? For all of you that don't know, Singapore does store a lot of rice and grains, to prepare for, hard times like today, or even as hard as going to war, right? So a lot of those things, right? There's a reason why rice and wheat are pretty much the carbs of many, many, many civilizations. You would say civilizations are built on these things, right? Because they are very small, very easy to store, and they pack a punch, right? So a lot of countries have big storages of these things, but that's a story for another day. So the idea here is that we, as a country, probably already have a lot of these things stored to the best of our ability. But as an individual, okay, and as an individual, what should we do then? Should we really just let it go and just wait? And I see so many interviews of all these people saying, "Oh yeah, 政府讲 so we will just wait and we'll not buy more." But in my head, it's like, guys, if you can buy more, go and buy more, right? Store all the grains that you can store. Buy like 100 kg of rice, a few hundred liter of oil, some of your basic necessities. Buy more and store it, right? If you have the space, you have the ability to go and do it, because like it or not, nobody knows what's going to happen going forward. And if inflation numbers persist, if every month inflation numbers are high, right, 2%, 3%, 5%, by the law of 72, right? I'm sure you guys know the rule of 72, which is if you divide 72 by whatever number, the ultimate number that comes out of this division is the multiplier, the number of months that it takes for something to double. Right? So if inflation numbers go at 12%, okay, 72 divided by 12, that is 6 months, prices are going to double. Okay, of whatever things that you buy. So yeah, in high inflation environment, please buy, store, keep it if you can. This will help you mitigate whatever price movements out there. And the interesting story was when I was in Turkey. So I traveled to Turkey to experience vividly this high inflation environment. I'm sure everyone knows by now that Turkey is in a mess with this lira dropping like crazy, and essentially food prices and daily necessity prices are just all over the place. And when I was there, my most vivid experience was this lady that I bought bread from. And while I was eating in her store, she took down the sign and wiped it out and wrote a different price. So I was like, oh my God, I beat inflation by 5 minutes. Right? But the reality is, as a tourist, as someone that is not from the country, I didn't hold lira. I was holding a foreign currency. So I was changing on the go. I change what I need, I buy. I change what I need, I buy. But for a lot of people that are living there, you see them buying a lot at once. Whatever money they can get, immediately they buy. And this is well documented in history. For the longest time in history, every time there was high inflation, whether it's Germany, whether it's the US, people literally run to buy things immediately, because what's going to happen is if inflation numbers are very high or prolongs and stays very high, every dollar that you make, every moment, it is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So for all of you listening in, if you have some space at your home, you have some sort of cash sitting around, which I presume you have, then maybe you can take stock on some of these things and store them somewhere. And to be fair, there are a lot of interesting projects that you can do on the side, right? You can preserve your own chai shim lah. You can, make your own sausages. There are a lot of things that are ingenious in our ancestral roots, right? All these ancient civilizations, they have found many ways to store products for an extended period of time. And because of the whole refrigeration process and the whole short supply chain that we live in today's world, everything is fresh. We no longer care about these things. It's either frozen or fresh. When we buy dried stuff, or when we buy preserved stuff, it's for the flavor. It's for the flavor. Wow, it's not like flavor. I miss this flavor, right? But the reality is, people in the past, they do all these preservation projects. Okay, maybe they don't call it project lah. To them, it's really a preservation kind of thing. they do all this preservation to tide through long winters, to tide through seasons of lull, to tide through life, right? So maybe it's time that we, as a community, as a modern day civilization, maybe also explore some of these things, right? Can we preserve some of these things ourselves? Because of course, you buy the preserved ones already. It's very expensive. So yes, if you decide to, after listening to this, embark on some chai sim project or make your own lap cheong project or whatever preservation project that you're going on for, make your own kimchi. Kimchi is damn easy to make, okay? The simple ones, so not the complicated, the OG Korean guys, but the simple way of making kimchi, it makes it a lot more affordable and more flavorful. Okay, so if you're gonna do some of these things, tag me, let me know at the Financial Coconut Instagram. Okay, I want to be able to propagate some of these ideas. So yes, buy more, buy now and store, and maybe a 3 to 6 month kind of storage capacity will be good, right? So if prices come to be a bit stable, good on you. If prices continue to move up, you can find certain ways to at least tie through for a longer period. Gives you a little bit more stability. And for fun fact for all of you, time before the US was the sole dominant power and capitalism was the only thing, in the past, countries actually report how much grains they make, how much steel did they create this year, how much pork did they manage to rear, and all these things time before US was the only system, especially during the time where the USSR was still a big thing. Countries actually reported that, right? So if you think about it, maybe at home we should also evaluate, not just based on how much money we have in our account or how much assets we have, but how much rice do I have in the cupboard, lao kong? How much something like that. Okay, so if you do that, don't tag me. Okay, but if you do any preservation project, you can tag me. Which brings me to point number 2, and that is to take up loans on big ticket items, okay, in the same currency where inflation is happening. I will share with you a little bit more afterward from our sponsor. Okay, so for most of us, we will be taking loans in our home currency. Rarely do we take loans in other people's currency, but I just wanted to put it out there as a caveat, right? Because if you so happen to take loans in other people's currency, whether it's the US dollar, Chinese, RMB, or like ringgit, or for whatever reason you take loans in other currencies, then there are other dynamics that you need to care about. When other people's currencies become more expensive or cheaper, how is that going to affect you and all that? That's a whole different discussion altogether. But the idea of taking up more loans in time of high inflation is the same idea when people talk about compounding. Invest early, compound, 8%, 10%, you compound the effects, exponential at the end. I'm sure you don't need me to repeat. There are a lot of people talking about this compounding effect. But in my episode talking about the compounding effect, I also talk about the discounting effect, which is the vector opposite of compounding, right? So compounding is up, 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 up. Discounting is down, 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 and exponentially. And in inflation, essentially is a discount on the currency that you have. If you have $1 today, inflation is at 2%. In other words, this same $1 after a whole year is gonna be only worth 98 cents. Not that this $1 suddenly shrink and change number become 98. No, it's just that this $1 at the end of 1 year, in a year of 2% inflation, can only yield you about 98 cents worth of things if you were to buy it at today's price. In other words, if you $1 today, at today's price, you can buy 100 tauge. Let's say 100 bean sprouts. Okay, you go to the market, tell the auntie, I got $1, how many bean sprouts I can buy? She give you 100. At the end of 1 year, that same $1 can only buy you 98 bean sprouts. You get the idea? So that's the whole idea of inflation. And this thing is also exponential. It also compounds. It's just that it's on a different direction. So it's called discounting. So in a high discount environment or high inflation environment where your money is getting discounted at a very high rate, not just 2%, right? It's discounted as like 5%, 8%, even 10%, right? There are times where inflation numbers were off the roof, right? And we don't need to go there. But the reality is, if inflation numbers stay so high, whatever money you borrow today, they just keep getting cheaper. It just keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. So the loan that you loan in today's price, at the end of 10 years, 20 years, when you finish the mortgage or you finish whatever your car loans or whatever loans that you take, is going to be a lot cheaper. And so if we take a property as an example, right, because that's probably the biggest thing that you will buy. Take a property as an example. Whether or not the property prices will end up becoming higher at the end of the whole loan tenure, that's a different discussion, right? But there's a general tendency that in high inflation environment, asset prices do move up. There is some sort of correlation there, but I cannot say for sure. But what I can be very certain is, in the environment of high inflation, the mortgage that I take, which is the amount of money that I borrow to own this property now, is going to be much, much cheaper because the inflation number is going to discount the loan down. And so to put it in real money terms, let's say today I loan $1 million to buy a property. Okay, this $1 million I loan, and inflation rate is at 5%. Okay, let's say inflation is at 5%. At the end of this 1 year, this same $1 million will not shrink. The $1 million doesn't become smaller. Okay, like it's still $1 million worth of loan, but the same $1 million at the end of the year can only buy you 950,000 worth of things if you bought it today. Okay, so it's a little bit of an abstract idea, but you just want to see it as this idea of money shrinking, right? Your money becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, and how fast is it shrinking is directly correlated with the inflation rate. Essentially, that's what inflation is looking at, money shrinking. So in an environment where inflation is very high, your money is just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and all the money, even the money you borrow, is also shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So at the end, when you pay it back, right, you'll be like, okay, just pay back. the whatever $1 million that you pay back at the end of 20 years is going to be worth much, much smaller. And if you want to push this idea even further, if your mortgage rates, that means the loan that you're taking is at 3%, but inflation is at 5%, you are essentially making 2%, Not in a sense of like, oh, you are really making that money, but the money that you borrow is shrinking so much that even if you account for mortgage interest rates, you are still benefiting. Right? And that is not to say suddenly, if you take this snippet, or these salespeople take this snippet and say, hey, you see, the financial gonna say, rent money, faster go and borrow money now and buy property. No. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this is the situation in a high inflation environment. Your money is shrinking, and so if you can afford to keep up with the mortgages, or you can afford to pay back these loans, that means you have consistent cash flow to keep up with the loans, then taking them now, it's gonna benefit you more, because at the end the money is gonna shrink, right? So all the money that you borrow is gonna shrink, and there's a tendency for asset prices to go up in a situation of high inflation. Okay, so this is a little bit I hope you understand. If you don't understand, come to our Telegram group. I'll try to explain it further, but to the best of what I can, for like a better way to saying this, is essentially what it means. Money keeps shrinking in a high inflation environment. It normally already high inflation shrink faster. And in that sense, if you can borrow to buy big ticket items, let's say like property, or maybe invest in something, or buy businesses, or what have you, you may have an outsized impact, that you can benefit from. Which brings me to point number 3, and that is to invest in companies that have strong cash flow today. Because the same narrative runs, right? High inflation means money shrink faster, right? Money gets smaller and smaller in a faster rate. In other words, all these growth companies and all these companies that are trying to sell you the future, by the time the money come in, by the time 10, 20 years later, when they actually start making money, that money is going to be way smaller in the future compared to now, compared to today. Alright, so in that sense, in environment when there's a lot of inflation, a lot of people will try to look at companies that can essentially spit out cash today, right? Because they're already making a lot of good money. And that is essentially the crux of the system and how it works, right? And you hear this everywhere. All your analysts are saying, there's a reverse to value, there's a blah, blah, blah. Whatever they use, whatever terms that they use, essentially what they're saying is to buy companies that are already making good money today, and take their money to do something, right? Rather than buy into this future company that in the future can make you money, and by then in the future that same money that they're going to make is already much smaller. And something else for all of us to think about is this whole big tech situation, right? A lot of people look at big tech, and big tech is sold down like crap. Of course, small tech is just sold down like mad, right? I did a market updates with the team previously, and I'm sure they're all talking about it. Check out TFC Stock Geek Out if you haven't. That's our investing show, right? And you already see all these small tech being sold down like mad, but a lot of big tech also have been sold down, and they are priced like they are tech companies or growth companies, but the reality is a lot of these guys are value play. Their growth is very slow already, and they are just spitting out cash like no tomorrow, right? So your Amazon, your Apple, or Google, or Facebook, they are all spitting cash. Microsoft, right? Adobe, they are making a lot of money, and they are essentially good value play by now. So when you look at them that way, their forward PE ratio, right, their price to earning ratio is at what, 20 or sub 20? I think Facebook is at 15 or 16, right? And all your Kellogg's your Coke all these other guys are trading at 40 price to earning ratio. Essentially, for every dollar that Facebook and Amazon make, it is half the price. It's half the price than buying Coke and buying Kellogg's, right? Some of these safe bet and what have you, right? So think about it, right? There are some interesting things going on in tech, especially big tech, specifically big tech, not especially, specifically big tech. These guys are churning money, spitting out money like no tomorrow. And I don't know why they are trading at these kind of prices, but that's not to say you should buy them. But the core idea is, in an environment of high inflation, buy companies and invest in companies that are essentially already making money today and making good money today, not something that will, look into the future, potentially, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but all that being said, investing is a little bit more sophisticated. You probably have a few different kind of repertoire within your investment portfolio, and if you do the whole broad-based index funds, good on you, right? There's no hard and fast on what is good, what is better, or blah blah blah. It depends on what are your parameters of discussion. Okay, so based on today's discussion of thriving in a high inflation environment, these are my 3 points. I'm going to sum them up again. Number 1 is to buy more, buy now, and store. For the longest time, even countries reported their success of the country by the amount of steel that they create, the amount of grains that they have, and all that, right? But following the rise of capitalism and the capitalism of today, everybody's just talking about GDP numbers. So that's a different discussion, but if you can buy more, buy now, and store in your house, at least something like a 3 to 6 months worth of supply, then you kind of have more resources to paddle through this situation of high inflation. We won't know how long is this going to stay. Hopefully not too long, but if it stays a bit longer, then hey, maybe you can store this and kind of ride out this crazy times a little bit better. And point number 2 is to take up loans on big investment items or big ticket items in general. Because of high inflation environment, what is going to happen is your money is essentially shrinking faster than before, and in such a situation your loans are also shrinking. So the $1 million that you rent is also shrinking at the same time. So if you can do that and you can afford to keep up with your mortgage payments or your loan payments, depending on what you're borrowing them for, then yes, definitely a good time to kind of explore something like that. And point number 3 is to invest in companies that can generate cash today. These companies that make good money today, they are essentially spitting cash, and you can take the cash to do whatever you want, right? Whereas all these other investments are talking about the future line, the future, what's going to happen. And guys, at the end, if it's a high inflation for a long period of time, the future dollar is going to be way smaller than what it is today. So invest in value, invest in whatever they want, whatever big tech, all the things that people are saying. The core is not about this or that investment, but just to recognize that good companies that can make good money today will help you thrive in high inflation environment. With that, I hope you learned something useful today. See ya! Hey, I hope you learned something useful today and truly appreciate that you took time off to better your life with the Financial Coconut. Knowledge is that much more powerful, interesting when shared, debated, and discussed. Join our community Telegram group, follow us on our socials, send me your emails, hello@financialcoconut.com. All your questions, I want to connect with you, I want to hear from you, and we hope to build this Pacer Pack together, ultimately reaching the life you love while managing our finances well. And I'll see you next week. Okay, so next week I want to talk a little bit about reopening our lives, right? So recently I saw an article by Today, and they were talking about how people are struggling with coming back to, quote unquote normal life, okay? And I know it's challenging, so I have some pointers that I've collated that I hope I can share with you guys and share with you coconuts, so that we can all build our lives back in a stronger, more fulfilling way. Okay, so I think that's well needed, and I just want to shout out to Today. I think today's journalism is much better than other big guys. so I think Today is doing quite a good job, and you should follow Today lah. What started as a free paper that people take at the MRT. For all of you Gen Z that are listening in, you didn't know, Today started as this free paper that people pick up at the MRT station long time ago, right? And today it is quite a reputable journalistic platform, right? So following today's article to talk about some of these challenges, I want to share my spin. So next week we'll talk a little bit about reopening our lives, right? So some steps to take beyond this harsh COVID measures of lockdown and in some ways isolation, in some ways reduced social interaction for a few years. Yeah, it's not immediately you come out, immediately, woohoo, you can go back. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot that needs to be done, and there's small little things that we can do, and I want to share with you some of my thoughts. So with that, take care, and I hope we give ourselves a little bit more empathy to reinvigorate our lives and come back, as a bigger social collective. Okay, no kanchong, relax. As the world opens up, as our lives start to pick up pace again, it will be overwhelming. But just give yourself a little bit more space and recognize that, as with any other thing, you want to lose weight, gain fitness, do pull-up, get promotion, invest, they all take time. Coming back to rebuild your life also take time, space, energy, support, empathy. So take care. See you next week.
Imagine having one extra day every week. More time to cook healthy meals, work on that novel, or just binge some good reality TV. Now it's all possible with ClickUp, the productivity platform that'll save you one day a week on work guaranteed. It's packed with features and customization options that no other productivity tool has, so you can work the way you work best. Use code BizTech to get 15% off ClickUp's massive unlimited plan for a year, meaning you can start reclaiming your time for under $5 a month. Sign up today at ClickUp.com and use code BizTech. Hurry, this offer ends soon.